So I'd just like to welcome everyone to this MGAA market briefing on AI in insurance, reaping the benefits by navigating the challenges, which today is delivered by Clyde & Co. So before I do any introductions, just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. So first thing to cover off is the polite asks for you not to do. So if I could ask that you keep cameras and microphones off because it helps us minimise any risks we have with technology. And ironically, for the title of the session, could I please ask that if you were thinking of starting any AI note-taking tools, that you don't do so, as we don't have the permission of everyone on the call, and we might even learn more about that in the session, so that would be something to listen out for. And let you know also that the session is being recorded, so everyone that's attending and also who's registered will get a link to the recording and a copy of the slides. Also to let you know that the session is accredited by the CII for CPD purposes, so if it meets your development needs, it's something that you can put into your training log, your CPD log. And my last question, this is a please do rather than a please don't. So very open to questions. So I'd encourage you to pop those into the chat as we go through the session, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So that's enough from me, I think. It just leaves me to introduce our two presenters today from Clyde & Co. So we have Tom Tippett and Isabel Simpson. So what I'll do is hand straight over to them to introduce themselves, as they will do a much better job than me. So thank you very much, and over to you, Tom and Isabel.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Isabel Simpson. I'm a partner in the technology, data and outsourcing team at Clyde & Co. I focus really primarily on data protection compliance. So today I'm going to be speaking to the data protection aspects that you need to consider when using AI. And moving on to the next slide, please. Today, I am joined by one of my fellow partners in the team, Tom Tippett. Tom's a commercial lawyer, and he specializes in providing technology commercial advice to insurance market participants. So today, Tom is really going to be speaking to the opportunity and also to the technology risks that need to be navigated around the use of AI. So moving on to the next slide, please. I hope really that this talk today couldn't have come at a better time, given the joint blog released earlier this week by the ICO and the FCA just on this very topic. And today what we're hoping is that by the end of the session that you're going to be able to describe some of those key opportunities relating to AI. You're going to be able to explain what some of the challenges are, what some of the legal implications are, and how you navigate those, and also have an understanding of the developing landscape in the UK when it comes to regulation. So as I mentioned earlier this week, the ICO and the FCA released a joint blog, and they reiterated that they are working together to support firms in navigating data protection and financial regulation in a way that helps them to innovate confidently. Now, some stats for you. Apparently 85% of the 118 financial services firms surveyed were currently using or planning to use AI. But of those, 33% felt that data protection was a constraint, and 20% felt that FCA regulation was a constraint on using AI. But the message was clear from the regulators that regulation and guidance, if it's understood, should act as a bridge and not as a barrier to innovation. And understanding that regulatory landscape will help you to innovate with trust. There is an absolutely huge opportunity in engaging with AI. As AI adoption accelerates, organizations that are hesitant in their approach are overlooking the important benefits that it can deliver. There are many examples, and there are insurance-specific examples that we're going to go into, but some of those more kind of broader examples include accelerating innovation, generating business-critical insights, staff retention, attracting talent. So failing to take that initiative can put you at a major competitive disadvantage. And the longer it's less, the harder it's going to be to catch up. we've seen that fear or not understanding the regulatory environment can be a really huge barrier to adoption. It can also be lack of clarity about what to do or how to use it effectively, and really understanding the rules and how you adopt AI with trust. So education is absolutely key. Learning more about it should help you to feel more empowered and also to change perceptions across the organisation. So just moving on to the next slide, Tom, maybe I can hand over to you and you can give us a bit more information about artificial intelligence and what we're talking about today.
Great, thanks Isabel. So over the last 2 or 3 years, we've witnessed an explosion of interest in AI, particularly generative AI tools such as ChatGPT, whose ease of use and human-like output has really wowed users, leading to its early adoption in both the office and at home. But what exactly is AI? Well, the starting point is to recognise that there's no one definition of artificial intelligence that enjoys widespread consensus. But in really simple terms, AI is the simulation of human intelligence in machines so that they think and learn like human brains to carry out tasks that normally require human intellect. AI systems therefore mimic human-like cognitive functions such as learning, reasoning, problem solving, the understanding of language, perception and decision making. And we can use AI systems to analyse data, make predictions, adapt to changing circumstances and also perform certain tasks autonomously. It's also important to remember that there are different types of AI systems. Now, one of the main types of AI system that you've probably heard of are things like ChatGPT and Gemini. These are large language models that understand and generate human text. They're effectively extremely sophisticated statistical algorithms that have been trained on large quantities of data, and they can generate plausible responses to user inputs. Very simply, they're predicting the words that should come next in response to user inputs. Predictive analytics and machine learning is another type of AI, and I think it's particularly relevant to the insurance industry. These types of AI systems can analyze structured and unstructured data to find patterns and make data-driven predictions or decisions. A further example is computer vision, and this is a type of AI system that can interpret and understand visual information. So for example, for use as part of facial recognition or autonomous vehicles. Now, AI isn't actually a new concept. It's actually something that has been in use for decades. But what is new today is the scale and sophistication of AI, especially with advances in deep learning and large language models, which enable more complex, automated and human-like interactions. We're now going to move on and look at some of the potential benefits and opportunities for artificial intelligence within the insurance market, in particular for MGAs. So as I was saying, I think there's two key impacts for the insurance industry. The first is the opportunity, and this is the piece that Isabel mentioned. And the second one, which we'll come on to in a moment, is the potential impact on the risks that insurers and MGAs in particular are underwriting. We'll look first at the opportunities. And as Isabel mentioned at the start, a key risk actually is non-adoption. It's not engaging with this transformational technology. And in many ways, I think the insurance market is an ideal candidate for AI adoption. Data, which is the lifeblood of AI, sits at the heart of the industry already, whilst as a market, we're also adept at adopting and utilising new technology. And if you look at the MGA market in particular, this couldn't be more true. MGAs are some of the most agile product innovators and distribution specialists that we have within the market. They tend to be data-rich businesses. They know their market inside out. And one of the things that their capital partners really benefit from and look for is the unique insight that they can provide through the sharing of data. They're also early adopters of technology such as data analytics and digital distribution channels. So I think there's real opportunity here for MGAs to make advances and take advantage of these opportunities. So on the slide in front of us, we've got a wheel that represents the insurance life cycle. And I thought to try and bring this to life, I'd share some of the examples where AI has the potential to be used. So starting first with product design, AI-driven insights can really help us understand our customers and to identify market trends. They can also help us to offer more personalised and tailored products to prospective policyholders that better cater to their needs and their risk profile. It also opens up opportunity when combined with other technologies such as wearable technology or the Internet of Things to have more technology-enabled products or even usage-based products, which can offer better value to customers and allow us as underwriters to assess risks more accurately. When it comes to distribution, they can again help us understand customer segmentation, better understand the profile of policyholders that we're selling to, and also improve the customer experience, whether that's through the use of virtual assistants or AI chatbots. They can also make our marketing and promotion more effective. I think underwriting is probably the most obvious area where AI can make improvements, and AI-driven algorithms have the potential to analyze huge quantities of data to help us assess risk more accurately and potentially price policies more effectively. Moving on to claims. Again, when combined with other technologies such as the Internet of Things, there's the potential for almost real-time first notification of loss. Claims automation and processing is also another area where artificial intelligence can improve processes and also save cost. Automating routine processes, collecting information about claims from policyholders, and also the potential for straight-through claims processing where you have simple and low-risk claims. And all of those things not only save on overheads, they can also improve the customer experience, making it more seamless and meaning that policyholders, where they do have a claim, get paid out quicker. Operational efficiency, well, as we've seen, there's lots of opportunity to streamline our business, to reduce cost and to basically take away the mundane and the routine and the repetitive tasks so that the actual things that humans do are the tasks where humans can add more value. I've heard experiences in the market where insurance businesses are already using AI to effectively record calls, make transcripts of those calls with policyholders, and then to type up notes on the system as a record of those calls. In some cases, freeing up as much as 10 minutes of a call handler's time per interaction with the customer so that they can actually spend more time speaking with the customer on the phone and delivering a much better experience for the customer. Fraud is another obvious place where AI can help us. It can identify patterns and anomalies where data points deviate from the norm. Natural language processing can flag suspicious language or inconsistencies, whilst network and link analysis can help us identify connections between individuals that the human brain just can't identify. So again, there's huge opportunity there in helping us with fraud prevention efforts. So moving on to the second side, the second potential impact, and as I mentioned, that's the impact of artificial intelligence on the actual nature and quality of risks that MGAs and other insurance businesses underwrite. And in a moment in this webinar, we're going to come on to explore some of the potential risks and compliance issues that relate to the use of AI and its adoption. And these risks and compliance issues are relevant for you where you adopt AI, and you need to have them in mind to make sure that your adoption is safe and that you make the most of it without tripping up. But they're also the sorts of risks and compliance issues that policyholders that you insure could encounter where they adopt AI. And if they don't do it properly, there's obviously the risk that something may go wrong and a liability will be created, which is covered by one of the policies that you underwrite. And AI risks that materialise will impact different insureds in different ways, depending on a range of factors, including the nature of an insured's business, the way that they've adopted AI, the type of AI that they're using, where they're located, and the nature of the liabilities that have been created. And to give you an example of a type of a policy that may respond to an AI-related risk, that would be something like a liability policy, perhaps for PI cover. Perhaps they've used AI to produce some content and that content infringes the intellectual property rights of somebody else. Similarly, if they've relied on AI outputs to make decisions and those decisions are wrong and the AI outputs are erroneous or incomplete, then that might create a professional negligence claim. And I think this is an area that's going to require active consideration over the coming years, particularly as AI adoption becomes more widespread and we start using AI in our businesses more and more. So without further ado, I'm going to hand back to Isabel, who will talk more about the risks and issues that we need to be thinking about so that we adopt AI in a safe way.
Thanks, Tom. So when you are thinking about and you're articulating the challenges, you might find it helpful to consider what are the input risks and compliance issues. So what is going into the model versus what are the output risks and compliance issues. So the risk with what is coming out of the use of AI and the AI model. And then I suppose the third bucket of that is thinking about what are your overarching considerations that you need to bear in mind throughout the AI lifecycle. And those are things that will be, ethical considerations, reputational risk, cyber risk as well associated with AI. So when we start looking at input risk, we are thinking about the data. So from a data protection perspective, I would be thinking about the personal data that is going into the model. And then on the output on the data protection side, we would be thinking about the impact on individuals and also on society as well. Now, before I get into data protection in too much detail, though, I think if we go into the next slide, maybe Tom, if you could give us some of your thoughts on some of the broader data considerations, and then I'll get into the data protection specific ones.
Sure. So the point around data and the broader data considerations is that all AI systems consume and produce data. And what we find when we're talking to businesses about AI, but also the use of data more generally, is that the nature of data and what you can and cannot do with it is often misunderstood from a legal perspective. Organizations tend to think that they own data and that they can do what they like with it just because they've actually got access to that information. However, and this may come as a surprise, there are no property rights in data per se. No one owns data. Instead, there are rights, obligations and restrictions that apply in respect of the use of data. And common examples include things like intellectual property rights, confidentiality obligations, contractual restrictions on the use of data, and also legal restrictions that are imposed by reference to the type of information that you're seeking to use. For example, data protection laws applying to personal information, which Isabel's going to talk about in detail in a moment. And what these rights, restrictions and obligations do is they have an impact on whether you can actually use data either as part of an AI system or for any other given purpose. So if you want to start feeding data into an AI system to train it or to get the outputs that you want, the first step is actually making sure that you've got the ability to do that safely and lawfully, and your use of that information is not going to cause you any legal issues or compliance problems. And you may have read about, over the last sort of 18 months or so, a number of high-profile lawsuits that are being brought. One good example is the action that the New York Times brought against OpenAI and Microsoft in 2023. And that's alleging that the makers of ChatGPT have effectively trained ChatGPT on the back catalogue of the New York Times articles. So they've accessed and used that information without their permission. So at its heart, that lawsuit is about use of data, and it just shows you the potential risks of putting this information into an AI system where you don't have the right to do so. Isabel, I think you'll now delve into the detail around personal information.
Thanks, Tom. And I think actually that's a really good starting point when it comes to personal information as well. There are some organizations who might assume that because they are the data controller, that they are the data owner. But it is really important when it comes to personal information to know that the owner of personal information is the person themselves. It is that individual who is the person who should be able to dictate what is happening with their own information. So when it comes to data protection challenges, there is a huge amount of guidance, which is incredibly helpful, that has been produced by the Information Commissioner on this. And that is because, in addition to data protection, the other laws and considerations that Thomas mentioned really underpin what you can and cannot do with AI in the UK. So at the moment, we don't have an AI specific piece of legislation, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later. But there are other laws which underpin what you can do, and data protection is a major one because, of course, it impacts all uses of personal information. So the ICO has produced guidance on AI and data protection, and the reason why they've done that is because, again, they think that guidance is a bridge, not a barrier. And so what they wanted to do was to put in place guidance to help organizations to adopt AI and new technologies and encourage innovation while still protecting individuals. So the first, really the major, I think, principle in data protection is the one of accountability. It is not enough to comply. You have to be able to evidence compliance. And the data protection implications of AI are really heavily dependent on the specific use case. It's also dependent on the population that the AI model is deployed on, also on other overlapping regulatory requirements, and also social and political considerations and cultural as well. So when we look at explainability, when you provide an explanation of the AI that you are using, you need to remember that there are different types of explanation that need to be included. And those include the reasons that have led to a decision, who was involved in the development, management, and implementation of the AI, who an individual should contact for human review of any kind of output, what data has been used, how fairness has been achieved, safety and performance explanation, and also the impact on individuals and on society, the steps taken to design and monitor the impact as well, and the impact that its decisions actually have. So AI also increases the importance of embedding privacy and data protection by design and default into your organization's culture and processes. Unfortunately, the technical complexity of AI can make that more difficult. So it is incredibly important that you are able to demonstrate how you have addressed those complexities, and that is an important element of accountability. Bias is a really important element here, fairness and bias. So AI systems, certainly generative AI systems in particular, they learn from data that is inputted. Now, that data could be unbalanced. It could reflect discrimination. It could therefore produce outputs which have discriminatory effects on people based on gender, sex, sexual orientation, and so on, and other sensitive characteristics. So the fact that the AI systems learn from data doesn't guarantee that the outputs won't lead to discriminatory effects. So the data that you use to train and test AI systems, as well as the way that they are designed, could lead to AI systems treating certain groups less favorably. And that is something that must be monitored on an ongoing basis. And then just touching on purpose limitation, one of the data protection principles is that you must only process data for the purpose for which you collected it in the first place. And you have to be able to tell individuals the purposes for which you are using their data or collecting the data at the time that you collect it. Now, if you want to take data that has been used for one purpose and then you want to use it for the purposes of AI, for example, you are going to have to understand if that purpose is explained to the individuals. You will need, if it's not, you'll need to explain it to them, and you'll need to really think about whether that is compatible with the original reason for which you collected the data. And then I think data minimization, just as a final point on this slide, is it's really, really tricky when it comes to AI, because you want to train the model with as much information as possible, but there is this data minimization principle which sets out that you should only be using the smallest amount of personal data. So you need to think about things like anonymization of the individuals. Does it really need to be personal data in order to be able to train the model, and so on? So just moving on to the next slide, if I could take just a moment to think about fairness in the AI lifecycle. I mentioned earlier about the importance of the quality of the data that goes into the AI. And to stop some of the output issues, you really do need to ensure that the system is trained on reliable and non-discriminatory data. That is very, very difficult because the majority of data is actually biased in some way. So there is quite a lot of due diligence that needs to be done on the data that is going in. And when you're using AI to process personal data, you need to take decisions about what data to include and why. And that applies whether you collect the data from the individuals directly or whether you obtain it from a third party. And you need to think about, if you are obtaining it from a third party, have they collected it in such a way that enables you to use it? Going back again to Tom's point about whether you're actually allowed to use that data or not. The purpose, limitation, and data minimization's principles mean you have to be really clear about what personal data you need to achieve your purpose. And you should only use that data, and the data has to be adequate for your intended purpose as well. So all of those things together will help to ensure that your processing is fair. And in thinking about whether your processing is fair from an accountability perspective, you're going to have to demonstrate that. So again, think about that data protection by design approach, conducting a data protection impact assessment, and there is additional guidance that has been produced around data protection impact assessments, around the use of AI and what good looks like there, and also ensuring appropriate governance measures around your deployment will also act as a safeguard against unfairness as well. Tom, I think I'm going to hand back to you now. Maybe you could take us through some of the considerations from a technology risk perspective.
Of course. Thanks, Isabel. So, I mean, there's lots of different ways that businesses can adopt and use AI, but I think for the most part, players within the insurance market are not going to be designing their own AI systems. Some will, some have, but oftentimes insurance businesses are going to be licensing a piece of software that includes AI capability or licensing a particular type of AI system. And when you're doing that, I think there's some important things that you need to think about to make sure you understand exactly what it is that you're buying, and that you understand the implications around the use of that system, and also how the data that you put into that system will be used. So the first one, I think, is return on investment. And this is about properly testing the AI system and actually making sure it's going to deliver what you want it to deliver. Some AI systems are still in their infancy. There's a lot of talk about AI. It's a very fashionable thing to be referring to when you're making available software and you're trying to sell it. So we've seen references to AIs in everything from mobile phones to regular pieces of software that we all use. But the question is it actually going to deliver real benefit for your business? And when you're investigating licensing a piece of software which includes AI capability, and you're negotiating the contract for that, it's about trying to bake in some contractual protections that in case that system doesn't deliver. The other thing which is unique to AI systems is understanding how that AI system will use and learn from the information that you feed into that computer solution. And one thing that's really important to bear in mind is that if you license an AI system, and it's an AI system that is made available to other businesses, you need to understand whether the data that you feed into that system will be ring-fenced and will only benefit you, or we'll train the underlying AI model that sits behind that solution. Because if it's the latter, there's the risk that confidential or commercially sensitive information can actually leach out and benefit the model as a whole. So it's really important to understand how that AI model learns from and retains the information that you put into the system. And speaking from experience, as many law firms, Clyde & Co has investigated the use of AI and is licensing different AI systems. But obviously, as a professional law firm, we have regulatory responsibilities and we have to protect the confidentiality of our clients' information. So when setting up our own AI systems, we've been very careful to practically and through legal protections actually ring-fence the data so that it only sits within our environment and it doesn't leach out. And obviously, if that's a concern for your organisation, and it will be in most circumstances, that's something that you also need to bear in mind. The other relevant consideration is actually getting to the bottom of what responsibility and liability, if any, the provider of that AI solution will have to you with respect to the output from the AI system. And as with most technology-related arrangements, it's not uncommon for providers to try and take as little liability as possible. And certainly with a number of AI systems that we've advised on, we've seen providers effectively stepping away from taking responsibility for any output. And I've seen examples of AI enabled pricing solutions that produce the first price of, an indicative price for risks. They're not taking any responsibility for that. Now, in that context, I think that's probably okay, because the idea is that it's just one piece of information that you can then factor into your broader thinking about how you should price a particular insurance risk. But in other examples, for example, I advised on a solution that extracted information from email first notification of loss communications, and it used that information to populate a claims management solution. But there was no responsibility taken there for the output of that system. And obviously that presents a potential risk for the business, because if the claims information that goes in is wrong, it can lead to poor claims outcomes, the payment of claims where perhaps that payment isn't justified, the non-payment of claims where perhaps it is, and also regulatory considerations. So it's really important to get to grips with what's on the table, what's being offered here by a provider, what are they taking responsibility for, and if they're not standing behind it, which is often the case, how can we mitigate those risks? How can we control them while still getting the efficiency benefits that we're looking for from that AI system? Other things that you need to think about are the normal sorts of things when you're licensing a piece of software. So appropriate data protection provisions in the contract, making sure that your data is safe and secure, and also thinking about things like availability and uptime, particularly where that AI system is going to become an essential part of your business. And obviously, we're all subject to FCA regulation, so we've got to make sure that our regulatory obligations are also satisfied in that regard. So Isabel has spoken about the input-related risks, which are the risks associated with licensing and setting up, training and feeding data into an AI system. What about the output risks and compliance issues? Well, this is all about what's spat out of that AI system. What are the potential problems with it? And there's a couple of key things that you need to keep in mind. So the first is that, particularly with large language models that produce text and natural language, if those words have been produced by a human being, then they would likely be automatically subject to copyright protection. But question marks have been raised, not only in the UK, but in other legal jurisdictions, around whether AI-generated outputs, particularly natural language and text, enjoy the same legal protections from international intellectual property law. And the thinking here is that there is no human element in the creation of that piece of text, and therefore they may not be subject to the same protections as human created content. So that's obviously an area that will probably require clarification through legislative development. But if you are using an AI system, it's something to be mindful of. and it's something you can proactively address where you share that content with third parties by making sure you have a contractual framework governing the sharing of that information. For example, that requires them to keep it confidential or only use it for specific purposes or not share it with other third parties. So you effectively control how that information is disseminated. In terms of liabilities associated with the outputs, well, there's a number of things that can go wrong with AI systems. You've probably heard of some of these, but occasionally AI chatbots and things can go wrong. They can produce offensive outputs. They can hallucinate. This is the situation where the AI system knows that it should produce an output that looks something like this, but it doesn't actually know what the correct answer is. And there's a classic example where a lawyer in the States used an AI system to generate some pleadings. And the AI system knew that the pleading should look roughly like this and that they should cite different cases. The problem was the cases that it cited were entirely fictitious. So that's an example of an AI system that's hallucinating. It's producing something that looks right. It's just not founded in fact or reality. So it's really important to be alive to that potential issue. As Isabel mentioned, if you train an AI system or put poor quality data into an AI system, data that's incomplete or discriminatory or biased, then you're likely to get poor outputs, and that can lead to poor decisions, which can generate risk and effectively cause liability. There's also the risk that because AI systems have been trained on a wide variety of materials, sometimes without the permission and rights of the rights holder of those materials, that the actual output may replicate and infringe the rights of third parties, therefore giving rise to potential intellectual property infringement claims. So who's going to pick up those liabilities when something goes wrong? Well, it's difficult. It's not always clear-cut. But our view is that if you are adopting AI systems and if you're going to use the output from those AI systems as part of your business and you're going to put it out there in the world, then it's likely that you will be responsible for those outputs. And I mean, it wasn't a significant decision, but there was a recent tribunal decision in Canada where an airline had used a chatbot as part of its website, and a passenger went on the website and used the chatbot to find out certain information about their ticket and their fare and refund policy. And the chatbot gave the customer an answer that was incorrect, and it actually contradicted other information that was on the airline's website. And when the customer complained, the airline refused to stand behind the answer that the chatbot had given, and the customer took them to a tribunal. And the tribunal found in favour of the customer, and they said it's not the customer's decision or responsibility to work out what is right or what is wrong. If you've put that chatbot out there and it's given them an answer, then you need to stand behind it. And I think that's a nice little illustration of what happens if you use AI as part of your business. If you're using it to make decisions, or if you're putting the results of AI systems out there, then it's likely you're going to be responsible for them. Isabel, I think you're now going to take us on to the regulatory side of AI and brief us on where things stand in the UK today.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, your camera is turned off. I don't know if that's deliberate, but just FYI.
It wasn't. I don't know how that happened. I can't get it back, so apologies for that.
No problem. Okay, so where are we today? And I mean, interestingly, maybe it was more than a couple of years ago, I was asked, do I think that the UK needs AI specific regulation or law? And it's it's a question that is still being spoken about 2 years later. So there are no current UK laws or regulations which specifically govern the use of AI. It is, however, regulated by a number of existing laws and regulations, and a huge amount now of guidance, as well as the regulators are working together very hard to produce as much guidance as possible. Now, that guidance and those laws applies to the output of the AI systems, also potentially to what goes into the AI systems, but not the actual AI system themselves. So examples that we've got, so data protection laws, which we've discussed. There are also laws relating to equality and non-discrimination. Of course, AI systems in insurance have to comply with financial services regulations and rules and guidance issued by financial services regulators. You also need to consider product safety laws, which may apply in respect to products that include integrated AI, and also consumer laws, which protect consumers who have purchased AI-based products and services. Now, the DRCF this is the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum, has been formed by 4 of the major regulators in the UK, the CMA, the FCA, Ofcom, and also the ICO. And the reason why they have come together is, I suppose, it is the name, as it says on the tin, it is Digital Regulation Cooperation. So they understand there's a huge amount of overlap or complementary, maybe, regulation, and that when it comes to AI, organizations need the views of different regulators, and what they want is, rather than putting them together piecemeal, they really want the regulators to come together and to produce joint guidance so that that helps organizations to develop their legal framework. So when you're thinking about your compliance framework and what you already have in place to comply with all of these areas of law, then it's a question of thinking about what needs to be uplifted to address AI as opposed to starting from scratch. So that framework really should be in place already. So it's understanding what are those new risks that are associated with AI that didn't exist before. So picking up on Tom's example of hallucinations, that was not a risk. Before, that is a risk when it comes to use of large language models. So if we move on to the next slide, it's worth just having a look at the UK approach. And it is an approach that has been certainly outwardly supported by the regulators. And that is that the UK is looking for a pro-innovation approach. The original thinking was that if they bring in lots of new regulation, that will stifle growth. So we've had a number of papers released. We've had the pro-innovation approach to AI, and then the pro-innovation approach to AI government response. And then I think if we move on to the next slide, then what we'll see here is we will see the non-statutory approach explained. So what the UK produced was these kind of columns of principles that should be complied with, and this is where you can really understand just from the regulations that I spoke about earlier. So data protection clearly impacts on transparency, explainability, fairness, and accountability as well. When we're talking about safety and robustness, that's your kind of product safety areas. So you can see how these fit together to form a principle-based approach to regulation in the UK, or lack of regulation in the UK. Now, there is a big question mark here about whether that will change. But before I jump onto that, Tom, maybe you can just maybe you could take us through what the FCA is saying on this and a spotlight on them.
Sure. Thanks, Isabel. So, as Isabel mentioned, we're effectively pursuing a non-statutory approach to AI regulation, and it's intended to be light on its feet. What we've seen across the world is governments, grappling with how to regulate AI, given its, potentially significant consequences for all of our lives and business, while still managing to capitalise on the opportunity, particularly the business growth opportunity. And you can contrast the UK approach, which is intended to be very pro-innovation and pro-growth, with the slightly more prescriptive approach that we have in the EU, where we have the actual AI a piece of AI specific legislation. And what we're doing in the UK, as Isabel outlined, is we've got 5 core principles. And the expectation is that existing regulators will be responsible for applying those principles based on centralised guidance to their respective jurisdictions and area of influence. So in the financial services market, as Isabel mentioned, that falls to the FCA. Now, it's important to say that the FCA, like other regulators such as the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, has actually been looking at AI and its safe adoption for many years now. In fact, we had machine learning surveys back in 2019 and 2022, and then they issued a joint discussion paper together with the PRA and Bank of England in 2022, inviting feedback from the market as to the approach that they should adopt and the challenges around the safe adoption of AI. Of all of the papers, that I think the DP 522 and the feedback statement and then the AI update of April 2024 are the most instructive if you're going to go and read them, because they set out exactly how, particularly the AI update of April 2024, they set out exactly how the FCA is going to approach implementing these 5 principles of our non-statutory approach to AI regulation and how they correlate with existing rules and guidance set out in the FCA handbook. And generally, what the FCA is doing is closely monitoring the adoption to identify any material risks or needs that are going to impact consumers or the stability of the market. They're going to take a technology agnostic approach and a principle-based approach that is outcomes focused. And they're not going to specifically mandate or prohibit particular technologies. But what they are going to do is apply their existing guidance, for example, their principles for business and the rules around the rules set out in the CISC handbook to the actual application and deployment of these technologies. They're also trying to get ahead of the curve when it comes to the adoption of AI. And one of their latest initiatives is the AI Live Testing Initiative, which has been launched by the FCA AI Lab. And this is effectively created to facilitate the transition to AI solutions from proof of concept stage to actual deployment, with the aim of trying to facilitate safe adoption and create positive outcomes as well as supporting growth. And the FCA is actually inviting firms that want to trial the deployment of AI systems and use cases to participate in this initiative from the summer of this year. So it's a very interesting thing to keep an eye on, and it will be interesting to see what comes out of that live testing initiative and what ultimately gets brought to market. But a fundamental challenge here for the FCA and for players in the insurance market is the fact that, as I said, a lot of these AI systems, they're not homegrown systems. They're technology that's been developed by big technology businesses, and obviously the FCA's reach only extends as far as the insurance participants that it regulates, not the actual tech people that are producing and hoping to deploy these AI systems. So I'll hand over to you, Isabel.
Yeah, so just I suppose a word on EU AI Act. As Tom mentioned, the UK is trying to be lighter on its feet. The EU approach is much, much more prescriptive. And what they have done is they have produced standardized rules which govern AI. Now within that, they also speak out to other laws that impact, such as GDPR when it comes to data protection and so on. But what they have done is they have established this risk-based approach, and there are certain prohibited uses of AI and have now been prohibited for some time. And then there are others that are permitted subject to risk assessments and other prescriptive obligations. And then that goes down to limited and then minimal risk. We are still waiting for the AI office, though, to be established that sits within the European Commission. But if EU data or if the EU AI Act applies, then you have to be aware that that is a really prescriptive model, and you'll have to follow that and be able to evidence compliance with that. Now, just thinking about the UK and what we should expect going forward, there is a UK artificial intelligence regulation bill which is currently in its second reading at the House of Lords. It is a private member's bill, so we don't know that will be adopted, but it's just worth being aware that it does exist. And there is also, from a data protection perspective, and very well advanced, is the Data Use and Access Bill, but that is currently what we call at its ping pong stage. So it's just having final amendments to it and going back and forth. So just another one to keep an eye out for when it comes to UK data protection rules. So I think moving on, what's really important, if we move on to the next slide, is around managing AI risk. And what do you need to do to take a proactive and really practical approach? So the first is in relation to governance. And I always find governance such an interesting word because it means so many different things to different people. But it's really updating your processes, your controls to take account of use of AI systems. So if you think about what you have by way of a compliance framework, what you have by way of risk assessments and so on, what needs to be uplifted to take account of AI systems. And I think also when it comes to governance, you need to think about who are your stakeholders and who needs to be part of that conversation, because it's the list is long. But it's really because you need different skill sets when it comes to AI risk. So there will be a data protection element, but there will also be technology, there will be security, and really that governance and who is responsible needs to come at the highest levels of the organization, because you need to think about how it fits into your risk appetite, but also how it fits into your ethical appetite as well, and what you're comfortable with and what you are not as an organization, and that will be individual to your organization. You need to update your risk registers as well. Think about the data issues, address the data protection issues that we've raised today and others. And as I say, the ICO guidance is incredibly instructive and helpful in that regard. Education, we said at the beginning, is key. So really think about training and understanding not only the training on how AI systems can be used most effectively, but what the risks are and how you navigate them. And that way you have a really solid foundation for using AI within the organization. Think about transparency and explainability as well to those whose data is being used, but also more importantly, those who the AI is going to actually impact. And think about protection. So that's protection of your outputs, preventing and mitigating any cyber risk associated, and addressing those not only the key legal issues, but also the commercial and technology issues and the reputational issues that can come with use of AI. So I would love to leave a couple of minutes for questions. So I hope, if we move on to the last slide, that today you're able to take away some of the key opportunities, risks, and legal implications of using AI, and also how you can take positive and practical steps to managing those risks. And now I hope I will conclude with that, and I hope that we have some time for questions.
So thank you very much. I thought for a minute my camera wasn't going to go on, but I am here. So yeah, we've got a short little window for some questions. There isn't any in the chat, but I do have one that was submitted earlier, and Isabel, it falls in your area because it's regarding regulation. So it was looking for your, I suppose, the crystal ball that you've got, and what do you see that the UK's approach to AI in terms of regulation might be in the future? Might it change from their approach at the moment?
Well, I think regulation at the moment is actually under quite a lot of scrutiny around the world. I mean, there is also, there's also talk of the GDPR being relooked at as well, as far as kind of simplification. So I think that that governments are seeing that too much regulation can be a hindrance rather than helpful. So my crystal ball, I would say less regulation, more guidance is what I envisage.
Thank you. I'm sure that's good news to most people. I'm looking in the chat. We don't have any questions at the moment. That doesn't mean that someone couldn't be typing at the moment. So if I do my thank yous, that doesn't mean we're disappearing immediately. So if anyone is typing, there's still time to get that in. So yes, so thank you ever so much for that session. It was really insightful. I now have a strange picture in my mind of what a hallucinating AI robot might look like, but something I've never considered before. So yeah, so it's really, really insightful and lots of information there. So we will be sending a link to the recording and also a copy of your slides to everyone who's with us today. So that will come out to you. And also in there will be a link to the feedback form. So I'd be really grateful for feedback so that we can shape your sessions in the future to what you're looking for. And we have a thank you popped up. I was nearly all ready to deliver you another question. So I think we can probably say that everyone is full of knowledge and thinking about it. So it is just, again, thank you to Isabel and Tom for your session. And thank you for everyone for joining us.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.